I'm going to start with a question. Do you know the difference between wisdom, understanding, and knowledge? Most people don't. We're going to talk about it in this edition of Finish Strong. I'm Dan Wheeler, Terry Steen's here, Brian Rowland. Some people call us the Three Amigos.
Yeah.
I just call us three great friends that go way, way, way back.
And it's getting wayer and wayer back.
It is getting wayer back. In fact, we're almost at the wayest point.
Exactly.
Okay. Enough of that.
Long way.
Yeah. This wisdom thing is, it's going to be, it's kind of intimidating for me.
It's a challenge for all of us.
It's a challenge.
Well, I think of wisdom as being able to use knowledge to make good decisions and to live your life wisely. That's what pops into my head first. What do you guys think about, what are your thoughts?
Well, you think about intellect and you think about the master's degree and the doctorate degree and on as some of these people that run the universities now, they have all the intellect in the world. But when you listen to the news, the wisdom's not there, is it?
They can't answer the simplest questions. They just contort. Yeah. Like, is there a difference between a man and a woman? I don't know.
Well, it comes down to common sense. I mean, you can have all the wisdom you want and all the book knowledge and everything else, but inside what's right and what's wrong. I mean, God's put that in each and every one of us, and we know what's right and what's wrong, and what's wise and what isn't wise, and have the knowledge for that if we'll use it. But
right. Terry and I were just talking about college, and we didn't know how to do laundry, really. We didn't know that if you just put everything in together that it might bleed. And a lot of my athletic garments turned pink.
It really did not intimidate the other team.
You guys didn't put your sneakers in there with
it. Yeah, some people have book smarts, but they have no common sense, Dan.
Why did you say Dan?
Huh? Brian, back in college, there were guys in the dorm. They come in and goes, that Wheeler has no common sense.
But he's smart.
He got great grades.
Who's who?
Yeah, I really had to work on the common sense ever since then.
We all do.
Since and since. Okay, let's get it. When I think of wisdom in the Bible, I think of Solomon. I mean, this guy, he became king at 15, and God appeared to him in a dream and said, "What do you want? What are you asking for?" Yeah. And Solomon said, "Wisdom, so that I can rule your people." And because of that, God threw in riches and success beyond compare.
Right.
Yeah. And he was a young kid. Yeah. So to think of him choosing that, and sometimes I wonder if God said you're going to get all this, did he just throw that at him, or did he use the wisdom Solomon had, which then parlayed into all those things? Because if there's someone who's wise, those things follow.
Right.
Many
Brian,
times.
What would you have done at 15 if God said, "What do you want?" Probably a Trans Am.
Yeah, 57 Chevy, No, but I think about with Solomon, when God asked him that, you got to remember his upbringing too. His dad was King David. And I think that he'd go back to think what his dad was. Remember, David wanted to build the temple. And God says, "No, you're not building temples." He put all the resources together for Solomon to build it.
You're right.
And I think that it may have gone back to that too, thinking how his dad had run the countries as his being king. And I think that had a lot of input on him at that time. But I think what's really interesting too was in 1 Kings 4, where it talks about his wisdom. And it says right here, God gave Solomon wisdom and a great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand of the seashore. I mean, that is, man, you talk about knowledge and what he had, and as far as the wisdom that he had in his head to use. It's amazing. He gave him that.
That's a great verse. Good research, Brian. Very good.
And remember all the rulers that came to visit Solomon?
Yeah,
because they didn't believe everything that was being said. And I can't remember what queen it was from Persia or somewhere a long distance
away. It wasn't
away.
Latifah, I know that.
It probably wasn't.
It was a Queen of Sheba.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, everything I heard still doesn't match.
And one of the first practical applications of wisdom Solomon had is the two mothers that came to him and each claimed that the baby was there.
Yeah.
And Solomon said, okay, we'll decide this. I'll split him in two. Takes out a sword and is going to cut him, or had a guy, one of his keepers, take out his sword. He said, chop him in two. And the one woman said, no, don't. He said, that's the mother. Give the baby to her.
Yeah, great insight.
Yeah.
That really is.
So wise. But all his building projects, he finished the temple that David had started, built many cities, and considered the author of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. And when you read Proverbs, I know a lot of the three of us have been looking at it, and I just finished reading it. And, I would get up early in the morning. I was getting up for some reason one week about before 6, and Pam was asleep, and I'd come down, I get my cup of coffee, and I just read, and you underline verses. You're like, man, that's good. So many good verses. But starting right in Proverbs 1, chapter 1, verse 2, it says, for attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right, just, and fair. I thought those were three keys to wisdom: what's right, what's just, and what's fair. And then I also like down in verse 7, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Boy, when you look at the world and some of the politicians and some of the crazy things being proposed, you're like, my goodness, I've never heard anything more foolish in my life. They don't have wisdom.
They have knowledge, but they lack the wisdom, just like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And it was neat to me how, and I can't remember what chapter it was in, but he devoted a lot of time to the value of searching for it and how it was like gold, where the most valuable thing he could possibly think of on the earth, and wisdom exceeded it. If everybody would search for it, the world is out there trying to make all the money they can make, have all the power they can have, all the prestige, the pride, it's all there. That's what they're running after. And he's telling us, no. There's something else far more valuable than all those things you're chasing. And it's wisdom. Right. It's wisdom from God.
Mm-hmm. It talks about in Solomon here, in 1 Kings, where it says that he spoke 3,000 proverbs and his songs numbered 1,005. It's just what he wrote. And it says, from all the nations, people came to listen to his wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom.
Boy.
So it spread like wildfire when they found out about his wisdom.
Yeah.
Nobody can get enough of them at that time.
Two of the key verses in Proverbs are well-known verses to all of us, but it talks about how to live and how to have wisdom. It's Psalm 3, 5, and 6, or Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. That's the problem with the world today, their own limited knowledge. Yeah. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And that's what wisdom is, asking God for in all my ways, all my decisions, every day, even the little ones, seeking God's wisdom and God's favor and trusting him.
Yeah. He talks, the whole book of Proverbs hits so many different aspects of it. And like the second chapter, he's talking about the importance of searching for it. Then in the third chapter, he's talking about the rewards of wisdom. In the 8th chapter, he's talking about the power of wisdom. Wisdom gives us power. And then he spends at least 10 through 15 and on into the book at just some of the wisdom for today. There's no more practical book in the Bible than Proverbs, is there, as to how to live your life.
There really isn't. I just looked down at Proverbs 3:15. Wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. And she, down in 18, she's a tree of life to those who embrace her. Those who lay hold of her will be blessed. And then you talked about it gives you power. In verse 24 of chapter 3, I thought this was interesting. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. How many people, their problems and their sins keep them awake at night, because they're not following the Lord. Yeah. You can be protected. You don't have to be afraid when God's wisdom is guiding you, and you can have sweet sleep and wake up refreshed. Yeah. I mean, wow. So much life wisdom in Proverbs and then in Ecclesiastes, some great things too.
I listed a few things in Proverbs that I saw that wisdom provided, and it's a short list. It's obviously not extensive or exhaustive, but wisdom provides reward. Wisdom is used for correction and discipline. That's what we don't want. But if we're going to be righteous, if we're going to live the way we want, we have to have that correction and discipline. And wisdom gives that. Wisdom gives us direction. Wisdom instructs us. Wisdom exalts God. And that's part of what we have to do is exalt God. Wisdom warns us when we need to turn another way. Wisdom gives us spiritual life. The true life that he wants us to have can only come through wisdom. And then the last one was wisdom reveals God. If we truly know God, that only happens through wisdom.
That's right.
All good stuff. It's just, the protection and the strength and the peace that it provides when you have God's wisdom. Yeah. He can give all of that to you. So, man, there's a lot of times in my life when I didn't make the wisest decisions or wasn't living in God's wisdom. And boy, that's where you get in trouble. There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof is destruction. That's in Proverbs. And we were talking last podcast about how sometimes we need to just listen. And there's a verse in Proverbs, and I don't have the exact reference, but, even a fool appears wise when he remains quiet. Yeah. He doesn't respond. Yeah. So true.
I think
I've lived by that one. That's my foundational verse. Yeah.
The fool part?
Oh. Yeah, the fool part. By being quiet, not as many people know.
Except for the time that the psychology teacher was about to call on me, and I said, Terry has a great answer for that one.
You did do that. I'm still having trouble forgiving you for that because I did not have a good answer.
Well, there were a few hundred ums, and you know what? I've felt so bad about that these 50 plus years, and I continue to ask for your forgiveness. Brian, what were you going to say?
I was going to say I had jotted down in my notes: wisdom is the ability to discern in between right and wrong, which means that right and wrong are real, which means that good and evil exists.
That's right.
You just break it right down, all between the ability to discern and what wisdom brings to you.
Also, I just had a senior moment. My thought just went right through one ear and out the other.
It'll come back.
It comes back around. Yeah. It's a boomerang effect.
Like a boomerang. Yeah. All right. Well, at least
boomerang wisdom.
We're keeping it real here. Let's go over to Ecclesiastes because that's another great book that Solomon wrote. There's a little bit of a different tone, but a lot of kind of deep thoughts like, what does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving? I'm reading in chapter 2, verse 22. All the toil, the anxious striving, which he labors under the sun, all his days, his work is pain and grief. Even at night, his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. It seems like he's frustrated because he's tried everything in life and he doesn't find meaning. But there's a verse that I've always enjoyed thinking about, and it's in Ecclesiastes 3, verse 11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men. yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I've always thought that was interesting. God set eternity in our hearts. We know that there's something in us that's going to live forever, and that's our soul. Very deep wisdom there.
Yeah, there should be a deep hunger there. And it's interesting. You can tell that Ecclesiastes was written later in life. Proverbs was written during the prime of his life when he was walking in wisdom. And then he made some missteps, didn't he?
He sure
You
did.
can tell because he is so, when he gets to Ecclesiastes, for the most part, he's throwing up his hands. There's nobody in the world who's had more of everything than Solomon. He's had all the riches. He's had all the power. He's had all the women. Everything he could snap his finger and get anything he could think of, and yet it still did not satisfy.
Right.
Why can't people figure that out today? That they're searching for the wrong things.
Boy, that's so true. Go ahead, Brian.
He wrote that in Ecclesiastes 5:10, when he that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, or he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. Yes, he recognized it firsthand.
Yeah. You know, here's a verse for us all to think about too. Chapter 7. If you're listening, and you're not really sold out for the Lord. Maybe you've been kind of playing church, or saying a quick prayer in the morning and running out, not really spending time with God. He says in verse 7, chapter 2, it is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, for death is the destiny of every man. The living should take this to heart. We need to think about that often. I guess I'm at that age, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this. You start thinking, boy, so many of my good days are behind me, and there's a lot more life behind me than in front of me. And that spurs me on to realize we're in the final quarter, the final minutes of the game. It's time to finish strong. Unfortunately, Solomon didn't finish strong, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I was just going to say that our life is but a mist. So he talks about how short life is, and then we know we're at the back end of it. That really puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
Boy, we're like just one little vapor in that mist left.
Exactly.
Well, I think about that final kick you talk about, when you're running a race.
Right.
Well, we're in it now. We're trying to give it that final kick, no doubt about it.
That's
the hardest I've ever worked for the Lord.
Finishing strong. But guys, isn't it so rewarding? I tell you, I love doing ministry with you guys, my best friends, and you inspire me. And we need to keep pushing each other on. Iron sharpens iron. And that's another amount of wisdom that Solomon shared. We need to surround ourselves with good Christian men who understand what we're facing and what we're going through, so that we can keep each other in line.
That's good. Yeah.
So there's many biblical wisdoms or examples of wisdom. And we're going to start in John 8:4-11. It's the woman who was caught in adultery. Brian, would you mind reading that passage for us?
Yeah, it says, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. So they caught her right in the act of adultery, and brought her out and wanted to stone her. But what did God say? Jesus looked at him and said, "Ye without sin cast the first stone."
Right.
And then he said,
how wise was that?
Yeah. And the lady's just looking at him, and he says, what do you say? Not your condemners. What do you say? Where's your accusers?
Where are your accusers?
Where are your accusers now?
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't get into the weeds with them. He didn't start some argument. He didn't bicker back and forth. He didn't make it political. He didn't make it personal. He didn't go there. He didn't have to.
No, just by saying that, I put a check in their spirit, boom.
Right. I've always wondered what he was writing in the sand. And that had to frustrate the guys. They're like, wait, we asked you a question. He's just, you wonder if he was writing a word or something. And but then he hits him with that, boom, right between the eyes. Okay, let's have at it. Whoever's never sinned, throw the first stone.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And then there's some wisdom of a wise man that built his house in the right place in Matthew, Terry?
Yeah, the example there is, and we all know the example there in the end of the 7th chapter. And the interesting thing is that this story, this example is coming at the tail end of his Sermon on the Mount, his most famous sermon in the Word, and all the things he talked about in there. And he says there in the 24th verse, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came, beat against the house, it didn't fall. But anyone who hears the words and doesn't put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. There's no foundation. And when the rains came, it collapsed with a great crash. So we talk about, he's saying, if you want to be wise, you listen to what I say, you believe the word, and you do what it says. That's where our wisdom comes from. If you don't do it, you're foolish. You have no foundation to life, and you're going to crash and burn. And maybe people listening right now feel like they're crashing and burning. Maybe they feel like they don't have a foundation to their life, that it's kind of wishy-washy, and every day something new happens and they just don't have that plumb line or foundation. Well, they can have that foundation through Christ, through his word, through the promises of his word. If we would stand on that, he promises us that wisdom and the foundation that we need to live the life he wants us to.
Good stuff.
Good. Mm-hmm.
And then yet a third biblical example is back to Proverbs chapter 15, verse 28. I love this verse. The heart of the righteous weighs its answers, but the mouth of the wicked gushes evil. There again, just gushing out, just speaking and speaking.
Yeah.
But to weigh something in your heart, people think we have the impression that we only think with our head. It's not true. You know things in your heart.
Yeah.
When you're in the Word and you're seeking God's wisdom and you're spending time in prayer, you know what the right thing to do is. You just know it there, and it's in a deep place. It's in your heart. So, boy, Solomon's choice of words there was really filled with so much wisdom.
That reminds me of, Dan, is when you're watching these debates and stuff on TV, and everybody just talks over everybody. Nobody will stop. And
Right.
This reminds me of when it says, just wicked poureth out evil things. This is what the mouth is doing. It just go in, just let it out, no matter what. And half the time you hear stuff and they're going, "What? You can't fact check that. It's not real. It's not,
But because everybody's trying to talk, you don't hear anything. Nothing wise is said. And I notice sometimes in these protests, when someone's trying to interview somebody, or, there's some kind of crazy one that wants to get the microphone, and you see them just shouting people down. They won't let you answer. They won't listen.
Exactly.
And you just turn, you're not getting your message across because I just turn it off when that starts happening.
Absolutely.
But you sense the evil when it says the mouth of the wicked. Those are wicked people.
Yeah.
They just are going to cancel you. They're not going to listen to you. You have no right to your opinion anymore. And that's why we're losing our freedoms in this country. It's
We have
crazy.
to listen to their opinion. That's what I like. I have no opinion, but I have to listen to yours.
I know. So what is the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Well, we've mentioned that many knowledgeable people don't have wisdom. They don't see God, and they're often so smart they're stupid. There's a verse in Romans 1, it says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And amazing how these university presidents of supposedly the top academic institutions of America sounded so bad in that anti-Semitic hearing. Liz Stefanik really just
no foundation.
Right.
No foundation.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. We talk about not knowing things. Right after college, I lived in a house with Dave Beaver and Doug Davis. I know you guys remember those guys.
Yeah.
And I was working at Channel 27, and I had a car that I had bought for $1,300 because it had an 8-track player.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
And the gas tank didn't work, so I was always running out of the fuel gauge didn't work.
Okay.
I never knew how much. I was always running out of gas halfway between our house and KMTC, and I'd be sprinting into work, and I'd go on the air all sweaty and out of breath. And so
you didn't figure out the importance of at least checking the odometer and knowing how many miles you had to a tank.
I thought that's a luxury feature. I don't need that.
He had the knowledge and wasn't quite sure in the understanding, but the wisdom, no wisdom at all.
So my mom was coming to visit us, and I come home from work, and I spend all night scrubbing the oven with soap and water and scrubbing. And then Dave and Doug, they're like, we got to do something about these walls. We need to paint them. They're dirty. And I go, we don't have time to paint the walls. So we all go to work, do the thing. We come home. My mom comes and visits. We come home. The walls are spotless. I go, Mom, what did you do? She goes, I washed them. We look at each other and go, you wash walls? And then I open up the oven. It's spotless. How did you do that? She pulls out a can of oven spray from behind her. Oven cleaner. I'm like, there's such a thing? And when she left, Doug and Dave said, your mom is like the smartest person I've ever met.
Things they don't teach you at college.
Exactly.
Never had a class on cleaning an oven. Did you guys?
That's great.
So, Terry, I don't know if you remember this, but let's each share a personal story, if you have one, about when God gave you wisdom. It was our sophomore year in college, and I had to declare a major. I was coming up on having all my general courses taken. I thought, what am I going to do? I want to stay and play baseball. A major? I don't know. I liked so many things. And I got I received a letter in the mail that day from my church. But the printing on the letter somehow got all messed up and you couldn't read it. The only thing you could read was at the bottom of the page, and there was a Bible reference, and it was James 1:5. And
good verse.
Yeah. Well, it says basically, if any of you lack wisdom, I don't have to look it up, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally. But let him ask in faith. And you had talked about wishy-washy, Brian, earlier. You have to believe that he's going to answer you. You're not like a wave. You can't be wishy-washy. And so I prayed, and I said, God, I need wisdom. Help me to know what to do. And I got up, and he gave me such practical knowledge that I didn't have a lot of. I sat down with 2 pieces of paper, and I put likes, dislikes, strengths, and weaknesses, and I drew a line, and I just listed everything I could under likes, under dislikes, strengths, and it just spelled out communications. It was so obvious. And then I thought, I want more wisdom, so I got the Bible major as well. I wanted to have the Bible background, and I've been able to use both in my life now, using the Bible background.
Now more than ever. Yeah.
Right. So that for me was great wisdom that God gave me in that moment.
That's
through a
neat.
letter from my church that was mistyped.
Yeah. It's neat to me that if you live and seek God, he will supply the wisdom, sometimes without you even knowing it, and allow discernment. I think of this house that we're in right now, the timing of it, the way everything worked out. I knew I was getting ready to retire. We loved the house we were in, but something just made me feel like I needed to start looking at downsizing in another scenario, a different house for when we retired. I wanted something newer that wouldn't have a lot of maintenance and a lot of repairs and me to do a lot of work. So I got looking around. God just opened the proper doors and closed the other doors. And we zeroed in on this neighborhood and house and signed the contract and began the process. And it was during the year of the pandemic. And little did I know that over the course of those 3 to 4 to 5 months it was being built, the demand went up, construction costs went up, And the timing of what we did, if I would have waited 6 months to a year, I may not even have been able to afford the house. And so it was just really neat that God implanted the wisdom that we needed to make those decisions at that time, and just blessed us and rewarded us for our faithfulness to him.
Mm-hmm. Both guys hit on two stories that just, as soon as you said them, I'm going, boy, just rang true in me. One was at school when I was asked to leave one school for a while, and
politely.
And as I was driving down the road with Paul Wanamaker, and Central Bible College is up there, and he goes, "Wouldn't it be funny if you ended up at CBC?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be hilarious." And he pulls in, and I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, let's just check it out." And I went, "Check it out." And he goes, "Yeah, just go over here, just get your basics net, and then get the grades back up, and just go back over to Evangel." I said, "Well, okay, I guess that doesn't hurt." Well, of course, the long story short, I got in there thanks to Paul. And
Wow.
but just to make that decision right then, it was Paul that actually had the wisdom to go in there and do that. But to say, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And look what happened. I mean, it worked out perfect for what I needed, especially in my Bible studies. It helped out on that. But then I was able to just take all the radio courses and the stuff that they had and go right back and then complete my major that I had. And that was one of them. And the other thing that Terry said was on the move. Our move out here was the same way. Our move happened right at the right time from California to Florida, where it didn't look like it could ever happen. But Deb's still working with the same company, but she's working from home, and she was doing it because of COVID. And her CEO said, "Yeah, do it." And so we were able to sell our house, which we were amazed at what we got, and then come over here. And we're in a neighborhood where our best friends are up the street from us. They used to be our neighbors in Atlanta, lived across the street from us. So how God blessed us when we just put it in his hands and says, "You know what our desires are, what we want to do." And he opened the doors for us, but we took the step to go through them and to follow what we thought he had us, what he wanted for us. And it actually worked out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting discussion, guys. I know that our time is going quickly. Any final thoughts before I just feel impressed to pray for people at the end here?
I would just say, what if everything we did, every decision, every action we took had the fingerprint of the Holy Spirit on it? And that comes through wisdom that God gives us. So if we had an eternal perspective about everything we did and allowed his supernatural wisdom to, like we sought it for everything we did every day, what would that life look like?
Mm-hmm.
Good thought.
That's a great thought to close on right there.
Yeah.
Because you can't top that. No, I agree with you.
Right. Keep that in perspective, that eternal perspective. Yeah. Let's pray. Lord, I pray for everyone listening right now. And if there's a person who says, "Man, I need wisdom. I'm going through a major decision," or maybe they're torn on giving their heart to you, Lord. You said the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And you didn't mean to be afraid of you, but to understand that we need to follow your ways, because if we don't, ultimately our life will be lost and we will be lost for eternity. So God, give wisdom to that person that's listening right now. Give them the answer to their decision and help them to turn to you for their wisdom. For we know that it all comes from you. We thank you for this podcast. Help us all to finish strong. In thy name, amen.
Amen.
It's been a great discussion, guys.
Yeah.
And I want to say to you listening, remember James 1:5. If you lack wisdom, ask God. He'll give it to you liberally. But ask in faith and don't be wishy-washy. Be certain. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Finish Strong, and we'll see you next time. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Finish Strong. For more information about Finish Strong and Fearless Faith, check out their website, ffaith.org. Make sure that you rate and review this podcast to help more people accomplish their God-given purpose so that together we can finish strong.